What's going on YouTube? Levi at Old Iron Off-Road here today. Out here again working on this little Scout 80. Today, like I mentioned in the end of the last video, we're going to work on getting the axles underneath this truck as part 2 of this segment in the Shop Series build. First video, if you watched it, we got the fuel system all buttoned up on this thing. Like I said, today I thought it'd be cool to let you guys hang out with us as we finagle this axle underneath the truck. A couple things we've got going on that we need to overcome. This axle has already been narrowed and it has some reed outer knuckles. The caster angle has already been set, referencing a 10-degree pinion angle. We've given ourselves roughly 6 degrees of positive caster. Now, to get this axle underneath the truck, it's going to require some work simply because the springs aren't perfectly flat, and this Dana 60 already has a cast perch built into this center section. So there's a couple of things that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to cut a little bit of a wedge out of the cast perch, and then we're also going to be using these 6-degree shims. So like I said, I thought I'd let you guys hang out with us today and follow along and watch that happen. So like I'd mentioned, this Dana 60 already has this cast center section built into it, and you can see here that obviously this angle isn't perfectly flat. Now I've already slid this axle underneath the truck for the sake of time, compressed the springs, and figured out exactly what we need. To keep a 10-degree pinion angle and to keep our caster in check, we need roughly 10 degrees of a difference in angle. 6 of it's going to be achieved through this guy, 4 of it's going to be achieved through cutting this cast perch. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to cut about a 4-degree line out of this all the way back to where the bolts are, and we're going to cut the stamped perch off, and we'll just rotate it with the springs, weld it back on, but we'll also use another one of these shims on that side too. So we've got this thing cut. Basically, you can see what we did. We just came in here like I showed you and cut this wedge out. Here's a chunk of what we took out of it. You can see here we're sitting right at a 4-degree angle. And you can see back here, we're sitting at 79.90. So we're gonna bolt the wedges. We're gonna bolt these wedges onto the bottom of the spring. I'm gonna cut the other passenger side, or I'm sorry, the driver's side perch loose and slide the axle under the truck. Alright, so we've got the axle underneath the truck, and hopefully this will make more sense now with this cast section now that you see what we've actually done. You can see here you've got the cut section of the cast perch, and then you've got this degree shim on top of it. Now, you could absolutely take all of whatever angle you needed to get out of this cast perch, But what's going to end up happening is the back side of this is going to get super thin, and you're not going to really have much that the axle is actually resting on. So that's why we opted to only take 4 degrees out of it. That way it doesn't remove much meat out of this actual perch. Now, another thing that you have to be aware of when you do this, your U-bolt plate is now going to set at an angle, and what that'll cause, there's 2 studs that have to go through here. It'll actually try to twist these. It'll actually try to twist these studs. So what you have to do is, I need to drill this hole bigger so it slips over this, and that way it makes the angle, basically takes that angle out of the top of the spring, so that when the U-bolt plate is placed in position, it'll set nice and flat, and our studs will go nice and straight through the U-bolt plate. So we've still got some stuff to do. I'm actually going to go sandblast and paint the outer knuckles for this thing. We can start putting the kingpins together, get the U-bolt plates blasted and painted, and we can start assembling this front axle. All right, paint on the knuckles and U-bolt plates is drying. Just a quick blast and a rattle can job. Nothing fancy. And we've started unpackaging a few parts. So we have a full Kingpin rebuild kit, and on this one we will also be using the brass bushings for the upper Kingpin and springless arms. Running a big tire, I really don't like using anything with a spring in it, and I also don't like the plastic bushings for obvious reasons. The plastic bushings seem to hold up okay, but the spring can actually compress under load and can actually lend a death wobble, especially running an oversized tire that might get out of balance or bias-ply stuff. So in my mind, the brass bushings are just good peace of mind. I run them in my own personal truck. Yogi's got them on them. Every build that I've done with the Kingpin 60 has the brass bushings in them. They hold up well. You do have to check the preload on them, which is still nice though. As far as wear goes, you can always just preload them down a little bit, keep them serviced, and they seem to live a long, happy life. We also have a full crossover steering kit from Rough Stuff Specialties. We use a ton of Rough Stuff Specialties parts on our builds. U-bolt plates, U-bolts, spring hangers, shackle hangers, a lot of that stuff comes from them. Really good, great place to purchase fabrication parts if you're in the market. So yeah, we've got to install these upper Kingpins. They torque to a ridiculous amount of torque. I've actually almost pulled trucks off of jack stands trying to get these things either broken loose or torquing them. I am going to completely bolt this axle to the springs and make sure this thing's nice and stable on jack stands before we go torquing those. Get in here and burn this spring perch in real quick. All right, so we got the axle bolted underneath there. You can see here where I actually had to do a little machine work on the plate. I had to cut the relief for the center pin a little bit bigger. I had to machine an edge on this where the U-bolt plate wouldn't hit the front of the spring, and I had to open up these holes just a little bit and slot these so we could get everything nice and straight. These bolts are just temporary, holding things together so I can torque the Kingpins. These are actually going to get washers and lock washers. But just wanted to kind of show you what we've got going on here. And looking underneath the plate, hopefully you can see what's going on. You've got the shim here, and then you've also got this shim which keeps this distance nice and equal. All right, YouTube, back at it today. Mission statement for today is to get the Kingpins put together, get the knuckles hung on the truck, and start throwing together the steering. So without too much talky talk, let's jump into it. For any of you at home that aren't familiar with Kingpin setups, give you a crash course on how this works. The reason why Kingpins are so stout is because you're not relying on ball joints. You've got these heavy duty bearings that actually go in the lower. You've got this cup. Oh, that race trying to stay in there. You got a cup that slides in there. You got this race that drives in next that holds the cup in, and you've got a bearing, and then you've got this big heavy trunnion that actually supports the lower, and then the top is going to be held in place by this big heavy race. So just the amount of beef, I mean, you're talking about a piece that's that big around versus a little bitty shank on a ball joint. With the exception of the Super Duty stuff, I will say I'm digging the Super Duty stuff. I've been playing around with the idea of throwing some Super Duty axles underneath the Scout. The only issues I can see with doing Super Duty stuff is going to a driver drop. The driver side floor pan is gonna have to be modified. If you look at a Scout 800 or a Scout 2, either or, I'm pretty sure on a Scout 2, I would say the driver and passenger floor are different width. I believe they are. To do the Super Duty axles, it would take a significant amount of modification to the driver's side floor pan just to allow room for the transfer case and all that good stuff. But very doable, and I definitely think that's something we're going to dig into in the future. So I'm going to put you over on time lapse, and we're going to dive into this, and I'm going to slam these knuckles together and get them on the truck as quick as possible. So we got the knuckles all bolted in place and the new bronze bushings all in and happy. We're gonna throw the steering arms on this guy, get everything preload torqued, and I believe at that point we can start mocking up for some steering links. Before we start bolting these studs in, it's a good idea to go ahead and run a tap through all these old holes. So now is a good time to give you an idea how these arms work. You can see these are the springless arms, and what you've got here is this heavy plate that sits on top of the bushing, and then you've got a load bolt that threads through this, and that is what actually sets the preload on that bushing. Or more preload, tighten the nut, less preload, back the nut off. Pretty simple design, works really well. So we're gonna get this guy on there. All right, and for now we're just going to thread the lobe bolt in until it stops, and again we'll go back and torque all this stuff to spec whenever we get to that point. So Move on to the other one, and just like so, we're starting to get the steering mocked up on this Scout, and we're running a Wagoneer pitman arm. And one of the things that you end up having to do with the Wagoneer pitman arm for the drag link end is you have to ream it out just a little bit. So we're gonna ream this guy. People are probably gonna yell at me for running a reamer and a drill, but we've got the steering links bolted up in place. We've got these, the drag link ends, the jam nut, and the threaded insert. Same on this side. So we sort of position the knuckles so we know that they're reasonably straight. Now we know obviously we've got adjustment in the actual tie rod end and the heim, or in the drag link end. So being perfect isn't necessary. You do want to make sure you leave yourself plenty of adjustment though if your toe's severely out, if your calibrated eyeball is not quite so calibrated when you position the knuckles and start fabbing up your tie rod and your drag link. Don't allow for enough adjustment, you might get yourself into trouble. So that's definitely something to be aware of. So now that we've got everything in place, we're gonna take a measuring tape, measure our lengths, and then chop some tubing down and weld up some tubing. Get these guys all threaded together and installed on the truck. And I suppose that you guys have possibly noticed this crate. That's a video for another day. It'll be a good one though. So as you can see, the steering angles worked out really nice. Got a nice flat angle on that pitman arm and drag link, which is what you want. You want to try to keep this as flat as possible. Now, a little angle's okay, but you don't want to get too carried away with it, because that does introduce bump steer. So a nice flat angle on your drag link and it'll steer very nice. So I think that's pretty good. Got the axle under the truck, steering link's all bolted up. I'm happy with where we're at with it. So I think next episode we will come back and I'll show you how to put Hydro Boost on this thing. We've got to do some custom modification to the plate that goes in this vicinity here. So we have the factory plate here. We're actually gonna ditch this. We'll use it for a pattern. We'll take some 3/16 flat plate, make our own plate to attach our Hydro Boost unit and master cylinder to. So yeah, like I said, next episode, that'll be what we're doing. And as far as this one goes, I hope everybody enjoyed. And if you would, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. We're getting to the point, we're almost to 1,000 subscribers. I know a lot of people with other YouTube channels may not think that's a milestone or a mark, but you got to start somewhere. And at the beginning of this year, we only had 40 subscribers. So thank you everyone who subscribed so far. Again, continue to like and subscribe and watch these videos. And as always, enjoy.